Hey, good evening, everybody. It's so good to be with you guys. I don't know how many of you came from outside, but I, for one, am going to allow some questions afterwards because I don't like shouting people down. And I'm happy to answer whatever questions arise. It turns out, if you ask people about what they believe, and if you really get an understanding for what kind of people they are, they're really not as hateful as they might seem to be, and certainly don't wish death to people on behalf of their politics or anything like that. I want to preface the speech just by saying something about the demonstrators outside. This is something that's very often not touched on. It'll kind of coincide with what I'll be speaking on today. And that is the philosophy of a man named Karl Popper, who has this idea of the oppression of the oppressor. Now, Karl reasons that if a group has ideas that manifest in violence, they are worthy to be oppressed, as that is what's required in order to stop them eventually oppressing other people. Because Karl Popper believes that those hateful ideologies will always manifest in violence. Our founding ideology is Christianity. Christianity dictates that we are not hateful people. We're not violent people. We wish no violence to groups that disagree with us. We only want to be properly understood and heard. But it is because of the philosophy of Karl Popper that people outside are morally and socially justified in calling for the death of us, in making statements alluding to clogging toilet bathrooms, which I don't even get. The speakers here tonight are not from Fresno. I mean, why would you harm your own university in order to protest guys from outside the university speaking? I don't know, I don't get that. But with that, forward out of the way, I'd like to thank a few people. By the way, if we could just come in, filter in, and then close that door, that'd be wonderful. I think the officer outside can help out with that. If we could just get that door closed, that would be wonderful. So I'd like to go ahead and thank a few people who were able to make this event happen, and hopefully you guys will thank them yourselves soon. I'd like to thank the California College Republicans, of course, the Fresno State College Republicans, great guys that helped put this event together, and the College Republican Patriot Coalition as well. All of these people were instrumental in making this event happen. We really appreciate it. And then also just a thank you to Fred Vanderhoof for helping us, make this happen. I'd like to get started today, and it's going to be a little bit anticlimactic for the people outside when we're addressing issues within the Republican Party. We're not going to be talking about, I don't know about the other speakers, but I'm not going to be talking at length about the LGBTQ community, transgenderism. We had this recent fiasco with, I believe, Leah Thomas, the swimmer. There's a heavy discourse to be had there, but I think this is going to cater more towards the right-wing audience. And we're going to be talking about boomers today. And this is a group that we could probably agree with the people outside, but the nice folks outside, they're not the best. Boomers have been disparaged at length by all kinds of people, and by the people outside, I'm sure, so we might find even some common ground on that issue. But I'm not going to be the guy to throw the boomers under the bus, because the boomers, throughout all their political fiasco, through ruining the economy, through everything else, were all along right without knowing it. And it's a wonderful thing, honestly, to be with all of you guys today. There's no way you can replicate this kind of energy, the enthusiasm of the people outside, the love, just the friendship of the people inside. Can we get a round of applause? All you lovely people. All you lovely people. I'm not going to turn the camera around on all you guys, but if the camera was turned around, you'd see good-looking, muscular, attractive people with big smiles, big grins on their faces, ready to have a good time. And honestly, pushing us out of, a real environment, pushing us out of public and out of this kind of physical engagement and lectures like these is probably the greatest crime of the globalist American empire, which my friend John Doyle has referred to as GAE for short, G-A-E. And the greatest crime, obviously, is subjecting us to, months of Zoom calls. You guys probably had Zoom classes. I had Zoom classes. These kind of call-ins used to be on Zoom, with the college Republicans. And, well, I'm happy to Zoom in, any college Republicans. There's really no way to replicate that energy that you get in a room with people like you. You can't replicate that energy. You can't. And young men are primarily the ones that carry this kind of zeal. And the reason for that is because young men were the posterity alluded to in the preamble to the Constitution. We are the people who are meant to inherit this country. Not just men, but men primarily as the ones who would bear the political responsibility and the responsibility of carrying this country's great legacy. And we were made a promise in the preamble to the Constitution that the blessings of liberty described there would be secured for us, the posterity. And obviously today, all those things described in the preamble, domestic tranquility, justice, justice certainly, and the blessings of liberty couldn't seem more absent. We see none of that today. Is there justice outside? No, of course not. Is there domestic tranquility? Well, I think we have an absence of domestic tranquility just out that door. But these are all the things that we were gypped on. We are the generation that was cheated out of our inheritance. And while I could give a 15-minute speech, blaming the boomers for all of that, throwing them under the bus, I'm not going to do that because I myself am kind of a boomer at heart. If you guys are not familiar with my show, I do a show on cozy.tv/Ty Clips called Out of Touch, which is a reference to that Hall & Oates song and also kind of the state of the right wing. It's one of the best songs of all time. The boomer generation, the music, the vibe, the white monsters, which we all had a sip of at the beginning. This is kind of an emblem of a time when America was more great. But the boomers let the ball drop, and we're suffering for that. So they get a lot of, hate, they get a lot of disparaging comments made against them, rightfully so. But although it might be unpopular to admit it, we actually need the boomers, and very few people want to say that or want to admit that to themselves. The demographic backbone of the Republican Party for decades has been white men who are majority boomers. And certainly that goes for all kinds of men, depending on where you're at. Hispanic men, the difference is just that as a proportion of the population, white men are more significant. And the Republican Party has had to rely on them for the majority of their votes. Now the question as to why the Republican Party has been pandering to demographics that compromise less than 20% of the country is, that's a whole different argument in and of itself. But what we need to outline is the dependency on the boomer generation. If we think that the Republican Party is, really struggling to win elections right now, imagine how bad that's going to be in 10 to 20 years when all the boomers, start dying off. That's not a good thing. There's people who probably, rejoice at that, and that's not good. We don't like it when people die. And hopefully they die on good terms. They forgive, or rather they are forgiven for the sins of letting the economy and the housing market collapse. But ultimately, without the boomers, this country is going to go downhill even quicker because an electoral victory for the Republican Party is never going to be possible ever again. So as the country's been crumbling all around us, the reason the boomers are at fault is because they've been, repeating these same talking points for decades. And you got small government, you got freedom, you got stay away from guns, and then you got, the age-old, as long as it doesn't affect me, then the privacy of your own home. This is what we hear ad nauseum from boomers, boomer pundits, people on Fox News, and really hasn't been working out. This country's been going downhill really quickly. But all of these talking points are actually right on the money. And we didn't give boomers enough credit for that, and we haven't been talking to them the right way. Right now, the Zoomer generation has been involved in this kind of slash and burn agriculture with political rhetoric, where they're throwing out all the old talking points and they're razing to the ground the boomer legacy. But I think we have to take a different approach for the future of America. We need to take an approach that tells them, you're actually right on the money, you just lack a little bit of philosophical or historical nuance. So let's make some ground on these issues. The issue of small government, we all actually agree with that. We might at times not sound like we want small government, but none of us want the CIA or the FBI creeping into our daily lives, putting our friends on no-fly lists. None of us want that. We don't want the Patriot Act America where every single, facet of technology is spying on you. Everything that you are doing is being relayed to advertisers and to investors and businesses. We do not want every piece of private information sold to the highest bidder online. We don't want that. We don't want that big government that knows everything about you. And we don't want our businesses, our schools, and our churches, perhaps most of all, closed because we didn't make an arbitrary medical decision. That was one of the greatest sins of these last few months. And the Republican Party at the onset did not do enough to combat that. And at the end of the day, we won't comply with any of it. We are not going to suffer through this large government that's been imposed on us. And in these ways, we agree with boomers, but the critical errors that boomers make is assuming that every use of state power is going to result in big government. Not every use of state power is going to get you the kind of socialist country that they'll talk about all day on Fox News. So in order to come across to the boomers and to explain to them this principle, let's use something that they know a lot about. They own many of these. Let's talk about guns. What is the age-old adage about guns? A good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. And it's so true, and all of us know that that's the case. But the government exists as a tool in the same way that guns do, where a good guy with a gun is necessary to stop the bad guy with a gun who will yield the gun for evil no matter what. And that's what the Democratic Party and the progressives and the globalists are going to do. They will wield the force of government against us no matter what. So what's needed to stop this? A good guy with a gun, the right people in power. A state, like a gun, can be used for good or evil. And we want righteous Christian leaders who will use the state for good, while secular progressive leaders we've seen are going to run this country into the ground. We could do a number of things. We could ban pornography. We could provide a financial stimulus to families who have children, allowing them to raise the future of America. And we can ban abortion, all without creating a larger government. Doing these things and scaling back some of the government oversight and regulations in the economy would result in a net smaller government, the kind of government described to us by the founding fathers at this country's inception. The reason we have such a fear of big government is actually because the left has drilled this into our minds. They're the ones psyoping all of us in the prior generation. Not you folks, you young folks as much, but the boomer generation was certainly psyoped into this. They were told by the left, sometimes in disguise, sometimes very blatantly, that any use of power, which was used to protect the self or for self-preservation, or that was used to enforce the Christian moral framework that this country was founded on, any use of power for these ends would ultimately be against our values. The question is, why are we letting the people who want to ruin this country tell us what is or isn't in our value system or in our own best interest? It seems ridiculous, but this is what we've been doing all along. But it's not ridiculous. This is what we need to be doing to survive as a nation, as a people, as a country. And they are trying to castrate the Republican movement. They are trying to, and we've had this discourse recently with, the Leah Thomas thing. They're trying to genitally mutilate this party so that we're never able to do anything great again. So how about protecting freedom, the freedom talking point? The boomers are right, again, but they lack the philosophical nuances. And this is more from the libertarian angle. Freedom is absolutely a good. Freedom is what we fight for. But freedom can only exist if decisions are being made, if agency is being exercised with a prior rational being, or if the being that is exercising his agency is rational. If rationality is absent, if good decision-making is absent, if somebody's mind has been molested by the mainstream media, they cannot make good decisions. They cannot act rationally. But every single aspect of our society impedes and harms our ability to reason. Advertising primes us to certain social agendas. Advertising, media, corporations, technology, right into our minds a script about what is socially good, acceptable, and so on. And at the end of the day, our minds are molested and our rationality is compromised unless we remain totally removed from these negative influences in our lives. So take, for instance, a heroin addict who sells their entire house to get, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the measurements of heroin. We could consult some of the people outside. But if you ask a heroin addict, or you see a heroin addict selling all of his earthly possessions in order to get, an ounce or a gram of heroin, you're not going to see that as a very rational action. I think somebody knows about heroin measurements down here in the corner. You're not going to see that as a very rational action. What rational person would make the decision to sell everything for a high? Well, no rational person would do that. But the libertarians and the boomers do not acknowledge that society, this system, is trying to compromise our rationality to lead us into bad decision-making. And if all that is the case, we can't trust the decisions made by ordinary people. If you are a slave to your vices, you have no freedom. It is as simple as that. So an analogy I like to use is the analogy of a parent and a child. If a parent has a child and he has the choice to raise the child in a crib with needles, with razor blades, being watched over by, somebody who's in favor of transitioning children, if that was the context you were putting that child in, you'd likely fear for the child's safety. So you would want to put that child in a crib where all of these negative influences, all that negative opportunity for self-harm is removed. That's not what we're doing, because to remove the ability of people to harm themselves from society, to make that harming thing, the harming material, absent from everyday life is big government. You can't make a decision restricting somebody's ability to kill themselves. That's big government. It's not. It is taking the choice to use the state to make it easier for good people to live good lives. And at the end of the day, it's a lot more possible, or rather it's a lot easier to live a good life if every single part of your society is not inspiring you or requiring that you degrade and harm yourself. If you can go out into the world and the influence of pornography, of Satan, of globalism, of these evil social, political agendas, if you can go out into your daily life with all those removed, you'll make much better decisions. But that's where they prey on you. They prey on you in social settings, and they want you to make poor decisions to compromise your ability to act freely. And that's why, again, the boomers are right on the issue of freedom. That's our ultimate goal. But freedom can't be achieved if the rationality of individuals in the system is compromised. And I think my favorite thing is how boomers will often quote the Founding Fathers. And the Founding Fathers are awesome. George Washington, you got all of these fantastic people, Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. You got great people, John Adams. And all of them would have been appalled at what we're seeing outside and in our society. Outside in the literal sense and outside in the metaphorical, larger political sense. So if we were to talk to a boomer conservative and suggest, for instance, maybe rolling back the legalization of gay marriage, in the political sense, or in the religious sense too. There's some Protestant churches that are going way the wrong direction. If we were to scale that back and say, maybe this isn't conservative, maybe we should redefine what it means to be married, they would say, well, hold on, you're using the state to limit people's expression of their own individual love? That sounds like big government. Well, that's the government that all the Founding Fathers assumed. If you were to go back in time and ask any one of the Founding Fathers if they were okay with gay marriage, they would probably laugh at you or punch you. It's one of the two. Because at the end of the day, the country they envisioned was made, as John Adams said, only for a moral and virtuous religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. The translation, if the people are not virtuous, the Constitution will not work. There's two ways we go forward. Either we make the people virtuous again, which we can do by using the state to make it easier for good people to live good lives, by removing negative influence from their lives so they are allowed to prosper and start families, or we completely stop relying on the Constitution as the framework for what's going to lead our country out of darkness. We stop talking about the different freedoms that are enshrined to a group of people that want to ruin this country. It's ridiculous. You know, the quote by Benjamin Franklin is that democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what's for dinner. And right now, we've got wolves all around us. Wolves that want to destroy the country that your forefathers, that your ancestors built and came to. They want to destroy that country. And their vote means as much as yours. And in that lies the issue with democracy when the people are not virtuous. So I want to say to the boomers, and by the way, I actually will add this to the voting tangent. If you were to ask the Founding Fathers who should be able to vote, they would answer with who was able to vote at the foundation of the country. It was men who owned property. And there's a good reason for that. It's because man is the political animal. Man is the patriarch. He takes care of his family. And if he owns property, he likely has a family. Which means when he goes to the ballot box, who's he thinking about? He's thinking about his country, and he's thinking about his family. The voters that might be out there, I guarantee you, are not thinking about their country or their family. I guarantee you. So to the boomers, I think we make a great team. But you need to start reworking some of these ideas. Unfortunately, this is not the America that you grew up in. This generation has had to suffer through the mistakes that your generation made, and that's why we are so angry. But we are not hateful. We only want to save what we love. So why don't you team up with us, pass the reins to this younger generation, and let's make America great again. Thank you very much. We don't have kind of settle down. Maybe they'll even come in for some questions. If anybody has any questions, if you just want to raise your hand, we'll kind of call on you. And I think I can make a sound assessment of whether you're going to agree or disagree with me based on your apparel and maybe your haircut. So we'll prioritize those that disagree. Any questions?
So you say that conservatism, traditional Catholics, who I have a friend who I argue with on a lot of occasions, would say that, well, the founders doomed us from the start because we didn't have an established church or an aristocracy, things like this. I try to tell them, well, you know, the founders believe in virtue and truth still, even if they believe in liberty. Is this a cope, or did the founders create a government that's so worthy of trying to recreate, or should we take the black pill and
Never take the black pill. We are not pessimistic people. We're optimistic people. I don't know about the other speakers. They might black pill you, but we're only serving white pills. This is a full course of white pills today. For all those who don't know, it's not a racial thing. It's about being optimistic versus being pessimistic. As far as the answer goes, the people at the time of the founding were virtuous. They saw in the American project a project. They didn't see it as simply a place to go do a job for a higher wage than where you came from. They saw it as a place to stake their lives and to see something grow. This is that idea of manifest destiny. This is the beauty of the kind of spirit of the American people that we are trying to today emulate. As far as not having a state religion, I think state religions are actually a dangerous thing. And we saw this with the Church of England. When the political was being meshed with the church, who suffered? The church suffered. The politicians were able to use the church as this kind of, means to, whatever they were going to do. They could impose taxes, they could do whatever, using the church as the validator. That's not the way we want this to work. So freedom of religion is actually a very important thing. Believe me, I'm LDS, I'm a Mormon. If America didn't exist, the restoration of the church could have never happened. It couldn't have happened in Europe because there were no free, religious expression laws. So, in my opinion, the foundation of my own church was entirely dependent on the formation of America. And that's what I believe is such a beautiful thing. But, church and state are often misunderstood as well. The state is meant to not be interfering with the church. Religious influence is wholly acceptable on the moral framework of our politicians, right? You should vote with your religious values, every single one of you. If you know something is absolutely true, I expect you to vote with that. Rather than say, well, I'm religious, but I can't vote on what I believe marriage is. Because all of the founding fathers would have said, well, hold on, what are you talking about? This is a no-brainer. Marriage is between a man and a woman, and then that man who has property is allowed to, vote. And those are the kind of people who represent the interests of the country best. So there's kind of two different parts of that question. But yeah, great question. Any others? We'll take maybe one or two more. Doesn't look like any of you guys disagree with me, but I saw your hand up at first, so.
So my question was, what are your plans to save this country?
So the obvious is just the political, right? We can't make change unless we get into office. And before I even knew what I wanted to do politically, I thought in 8th grade, people complain a lot about what's happening. Why don't they ever put themselves in the position to change it? So even before I knew what I was going to change, I knew that in order to change something, I had to be in a certain place. All of you guys, though, can lead by example in your own lives, and I think you've done that today. Being well-dressed, taking care of yourself, having a smile on your face, going to the gym, taking cold showers, taking care of yourself generally, and going to church is going to make you an example to the rest of the people around you. All of the people in this room, I expect, have a more net positive or mean or average positive relationship with their parents. And I don't know if the same can be said for the people outside. So if you live your life virtuously, you will become that light on a hill. You will be that the shining city on a hill for other people to look to. And if what you're doing and the beliefs that you have are helping you lead that life that is admirable, then people will try to emulate that. And eventually, everybody's going to start saying, well, hold on, I'm sick of being depressed. I'm sick of living a life that's leading me down this bad road. These guys are all pretty happy. I wonder what they're doing differently. And that's how, we find more people. Any other questions? Let's go. Do any of you guys, are any of you really left-wing? If you are, that'll be exciting. Okay, sounds good. So I think I saw you. Yes?
So you talked about John Adams and what he said about moral people.
And religious people.
Yeah. Do you make any distinction between political/fiscal conservatives and social conservatives? Because I think there's a difference, because the Republican Party today admires both John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, but they were both kind of contradictory in some areas, that Adams was more of a social conservative, but when it came to government, he tended to believe in big government.
Mhm.
Where you mentioned what he said about morality and religion, whereas Thomas Jefferson was more of a small government political conservative, but when it came to social issues, he had some interesting views. Like, he actually fought for decriminalizing homosexuality in Virginia and other parts of the U.S. And his opponents accused him of being godless and atheistic because he supported the French Revolution.
And I think the reason they, sorry to interrupt, there's a lot to address within that. I think the reason they accused him of that is because that accusation held weight. You accuse somebody of being godless today, it's like, oh, let me go vote for the godless guy. No, that represents a large portion of America, unfortunately. So, Thomas Jefferson had outside opinions, but even if he was talking about decriminalization, which I don't know if that's true, I'd have to look into it myself. I'll take you at your word. I think you're a nice guy. Even if that were true, there's a reason why that was never popularized and why, maybe he was ostracized for those social views. The social views that were shared by the majority of the founding fathers, who, many of which were deists, right? They weren't even themselves expressly religious. They weren't necessarily Catholic or Protestant or anything like that. They understood that the framework of the country and the people in the country needed to be of a certain stock or caliber. They had to have certain opinions. So I would be surprised if Thomas Jefferson, even in his fight supposedly for decriminalizing homosexuality, would have accepted the rewriting of what marriage is, or if he would have rewritten the definition of marriage in the legal or social sense. You have to remember that same movement of Americans ultimately inspired the Puritan movement too. And banning alcohol today would probably never ever happen because the stock of people have certainly changed some of their social issues. So, of course, the views of all the people in office are never going to totally reflect, the actions of the people, but a lot of the time it's because they expect better of the people and they themselves, don't hold themselves to the same standard, which of course is part of the flaw in relying always on the founding fathers, but the larger principle is that the vast majority of the founding fathers would have totally sided with social conservatives on the issues. So even like you say, a fiscal conservative back then would have been more so aligning with, a social conservative on these issues than anybody outside or many of the conservatives that we have today. And so that divide between fiscal and social conservatism exists now in a way it never did back then because there were social views that were just simply the norm. All right, I think that's going to be it. We're going to pass it to our next speaker. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for the questions.
Okay, sorry about that. That was my first energy drink, and I didn't realize how dry it made my mouth. Wow. So, what's up, guys? I'm Carson Wolf. You guys might not know me. I'm a little bit new to the political realm. I went through a huge transition. Not in the gender sense. I didn't cut off my balls or anything. I didn't do. Don't worry. That's a false flag. But I'm very new, I used to be a liberal. I used to be liberal and cringe and whatnot. But let me just say, I just thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate it. We've been working on this for a while. Oh, sorry, I hit the microphone. But we've been working on this for a while. Thank you guys so much for coming out. It's so great to be in person. See all of you guys. They've been trying to shut this event down, calling us white supremacists, white nationalists, all the mean words, they've been doing all that. So we've had a good time organizing this event. But yeah, now we're finally here. I'm thinking we're back. You guys think we're back? I think we're back. Let's freaking go, guys. Anyways, I'm Carson Wolf. I am a political pundit. I'm an America First activist. I host a show on cozy.tv/Carson. Go and follow that. It's super awesome. Awesome show. Top 10 shows on Cozy. Sorry, Kai. But, most importantly, I am a Zoomer, okay? I get the problems that we're facing. I get the frustrations. And unlike Kai, I blend the boomers, okay? I'm going to take off this hat. I don't look very great in the hat. I have a huge head. I don't know if you noticed my huge forehead, but signed by the leader, so, anyways, I blame the boomers, because look, I used to be a liberal. I used to be a liberal, an atheist, a simp. Yes, I used to be a liberal simp. I was very cringe, I was the product of just propaganda that I would consume and then regurgitate. I would regurgitate these talking points. You know, I'd see some like girl who I thought was hot. You know, I'd see a girl and I'd see her post like some story on Impact or like Feminist, or one of these garbage accounts. You guys know what I'm talking about? I'd see her post something on her story about like how abortion is so great. You know, it's like so pro women. It's like all these babies were killing. It's so great. You know, so I'd see that and I'd adopt those beliefs because I'd be like, oh wow, I want to get with that girl. She's hot. You know, so I'd adopt those. I was the constant just product of this mass consumption propaganda. And let's face it, this is like 97% of people that we know. I mean, like, seriously, I hate to admit it, but like 97% of the people that we're dealing with, even on the conservative side, are just regurgitating the talking points that are just shoved in our faces. You know, they're popular amongst our peers. This is kind of what we're the product of. It's almost like we have, you know, fake beliefs. It's like we have no conviction for what we believe in, you know? We don't really believe. We all have fake beliefs. Everything's fake nowadays, you know? We've inherited this plastic culture. You know, everything's supposed to give the illusion of something, of conviction, but it's fake. Everything we've inherited is fake. You know, boomers, they pass down a plastic culture to us. Plastic culture, you know, like, let's look at the things, what have boomers conserved? Ask yourselves that. Well, they haven't conserved our culture, they haven't conserved the family unit, they haven't even conserved the lives of babies, for God's sakes. I mean, I think that's like the bare minimum. They can't conserve anything, you know? And like, we're supposed to be conservatives, guys. Come on. We're supposed to be conservatives. We're supposed to conserve things, you know? We're supposed to conserve freedoms. You guys really feel free. I mean, what do they conserve? All these fake things, all this plastic culture? Is this what we're talking about? You know, everything is fake. Our bodies are fake. Our beliefs are fake, of course, like I said. You know, everything is, our bodies, our beliefs, our friends, our leaders, they're just propped up in front of a soundstage now, you know? They're just put up in front of some Hollywood background. That's our leaders now. Our conservatives are fake, you know, they're propped up as like political court jesters, essentially, where we have like Dan Crenshaw and like Liz Cheney, these kinds of people. Boo, they're rhinos, they suck, they betrayed us at every single stop of the turn. And the reason for this is because boomers pass down this culture to us. You know, and then they'll say, no, Carson, we actually conserve so much. We conserve your freedoms. You know, your freedom, my freedoms, yeah. It's like, you should be thankful for us. You inherited the most free nation on the planet. Do you guys feel very free right now? You know, do you feel very free? I don't feel free. I mean, I'm banned from like every single public platform. You know, like, look at people like me and Kai, we're teenagers. We're in college right now, and people have banned us, yet, you know, like the Taliban, they're chill, Antifa. These guys out here who are just yelling obscenities, they're perfectly allowed to do that. But us saying that you shouldn't kill babies, that's just too far. You can't do that. So you feel very free. You know, all they've protected, all these freedoms that they've protected is the freedom to be banned, the freedom to be silenced, the freedom, I got banned from PayPal, you know, the freedom to be banned from banking services. I got put on probation at my school. I'm still in school, by the way, so we have a joyous time with all these kinds of people outside. I have to deal with these on my campus. You know, at my school, I got put on probation, suspended from student council because I refused to get tested for the Kung flu, you know. Do you guys think that's freedom? Is that freedom to you guys? They haven't even protected the freedom to teach the Bible in school. You know, the only book banned from schools nowadays is the Bible. It's not Mein Kampf. It's the Bible, of course, because, you know. And they protected the freedom to kill babies and pursue your chosen form of self-destruction, as John says. You know, this is what the culture that we have conserved. And then, you know, they go on and tell us, oh, like, hey, don't worry, you have the freedom to smoke weed. You have the freedom to, you know, distract yourself from the collapse of your civilization. Oh, your civilization's collapsing. You know, your movement has failed. At least you guys have, you know, weed. You can smoke a joint. You can smoke a dookie. You can go hook up with some nameless girl. Distract yourself from the collapse of our civilization. Incredible, you know. Is this the future of America, guys? Is it the future? Please. Is it the future of America?
No.
No, it's not. No, it is not. Because you know what the freedom of America, or the future of America, it's not the freedom of America. I'm not a boomer. You guys think I'm a boomer? I'm not a boomer. I'm a zoomer. Okay? What is the future of America? Future of America is America first, bitch. Seriously. I mean, Force is? It's young, straight Christian men, guys. That's what it is. That's what America First is about, okay? You know, and the Fresno Beats of the world, these Ben Lorber guys who report on, like, all the stuff that we say, they'll be like, how can you say that, Carson? How can you say the future of America is straight, white, young Christian men? All right? No, I didn't say white. My bad. You know, the left is conditioning. It's just a product of the conditioning, guys. We're trying to break it, but, you know, sometimes I fall back into it. But they'll say, how can you say that, Carson? And I'll tell you how I can say that. I mean, look at us, guys. You know, the media, they like to portray us as, like, all white people. But, you know, we're not. We have tons of Hispanic people. Like, there's a lot of Hispanic and black Zoomers. And women, too. Like, look at, like, we have a lot of women in the crowd, too. Or, you know, a good amount of women in the crowd. Thanks for coming out. Same with Hispanic and black people. You guys came out because these people are tired of this shit. They're tired of the fakeness. We Zoomers are so hungry for just anything that's real. Like, you know, give us something real. And the boomer conservatives have not given us that, you know. But look at us. Our whole lives, everybody around us has been coddled, okay? You know, our teachers, our schools, our institutions, they have coddled everybody around us to make everybody around us feel safe and comfortable. You know, you shouldn't feel offended. We can't let anybody get offended at the expense of us. You know, everybody else gets to feel safe, but not us, you know. And they've redistributed our meaning, our sense of meaning, our brotherhood, our community, and they've redistributed it to everybody else. You know, everybody, all the boomer conservatives, they want to talk about the redistribution of wealth. You know, that socialism sucks, guys. Socialism sucks. Yeah, I mean, I get that, dude. We're on the same page. But not every form of evil is socialism. And look, what they've done is not the redistribution of wealth. What they've done first is the redistribution of meaning. And they've done that with our generation. Zoomers, especially us men, we have all had our meaning, our community, our brotherhood redistributed to everybody else. Everybody around us. Everybody needs to belong to a community. You know, you get all the black women, black people, women, Hispanics, LGBT, even like your weird sexual practices, you know, the exotic sexual practices that they're flying flags for out there. Everybody gets to belong to a community. Everybody gets a sense of brotherhood, you know. Even the furries, for God's sakes, guys. I mean, like, I just popped in my mind. There's nothing that is more illustrative. Is that a word? Of the collapse of American culture than the fact that furries get to have their own community. You know, it's perfectly socially allowed. But not us. Not if you're white, not if you're straight, not if you're Christian, especially not if you're Christian, and not if you're a man, you know? We can't have that. And conservatives as well. You know, we have to go and hide out because we just can't have that sense of community, and that's why we're so scattered. We're fragmented across campuses. There's no unity in anybody. This idea is what this movement is about, okay? We are all united under a common struggle, okay? Our whole lives, everybody has tried to oppress us, okay? The only systemic racism that exists in this country is against white people. Like, let's face it, you know, in our education system, we get points taken away for white. If you apply for a job, nowadays, we gotta accept somebody who's more diverse. You know, Carson, you're just not diverse enough. You're not diverse enough, guy. Come on. I mean, I should have been born more diverse. Don't you guys think? And then, you know, in colleges, they will actively try to accept people who are not like us, who don't look like me. You know. They've taken everything from us, our movies, they've taken our movies and then they made them woke or given them to women. They are superheroes, for God's sake, they made them gay. You know, nowadays Superman is gay. I don't know when that happened. That's not the Superman I remember. A lot of the women have been turned into feminists who hate us, who are taught that we're evil. You know, they've taken God out of our society. They've taken God out of our schools. Everything's, and now we have to go into our basements and like worship God in private. You know, like in our jokes and our humor, they have framed it as though it's evil, it's racist. You know, they can't picture us having any sort of fun without it being fueled by some sort of evil. This is what they've done to us. This is how they've trained society to view us. And then, that's not even the worst part. That's not the worst part. What the worst part is, you know what's worse? Is these freaking boomer leaders These guys who claim to represent us, they'll be like, oh, we're on your side, Carson, we get what you're going through. No, you really don't, because look at the causes that they champion. You know, the Women's Young Conservative Conference, the Blacks for Trump, the LGBT Conservative Union. It's like, are you kidding me? What about, and they'll say, like, we need a party that represents Cuban Americans or black moms or whatever. What about us? You know? What about the boys? What about the boys? Whatever happened to them representing us? What about the white, Christian, straight, conservative men? Isn't that who's the Zoomers especially? I mean, they forgot about us. No, they're too afraid to be called mean names, you know? These mean names, it's too much to handle. They want to be liked by people who hate them, you know? Yeah, they're too afraid to be called mean names. They need to appeal to minorities. How about a movement that inspires a generation of young, white, straight Christian men? Huh? How about that movement? That's the movement that I want. That awakens the potential of a generation of straight, white Christian men. Without role models, with divorced parents, you know, who have been bullied for being too white, with no sense of meaning, no brotherhood, nothing, no faith. I want a movement that reawakens the revolutionary spirit of a generation of forgotten people. They've forgotten about us, and they've tried to stop that movement for years. They've tried to stop it at every turn. They've tried to paint us as white nationalists. They've tried to paint us as racists. They've called us Nazis. You know, Christian nationalists, that's the one I get the most. But they have tried to stop this movement because that movement would be truly revolutionary. And, you know, the boomers, they just can't have that. They can't have a movement. We got to go back to being a normal party that appeals to, you know, the minority and, like, everybody like that. I want a movement that represents this country. And we are that country right now. We've inherited this country. They've given us the reins, and we're going to take it back. They want to, like, pat us on the head. They want to say, oh, you know, good job. You got a lot of great ideas, Carson. You got a lot of great ideas. But, you know, you're too young. Why don't you just step aside, you know, go and get an accounting degree or something while we handle it. We handle it from here. The big boys will take it from here. No. Not this time, guys. Not this time. This is our time, okay? This is our time. They had their time, and they chose to sell this country for a profit. This is our time, and we are not going to waste it. You know, America First is inevitable. This movement is inevitable, guys. That's why we're here, is because we are tired of conserving a world that's not worth conserving. Okay? We are going to not conserve a world that's not worth conserving. This fake one, this one that tries to oppress us at every single turn stop. We are going to build a better one. We are going to build one that we feel comfortable with our children growing up in. Do you feel comfortable sending your kids into this world that we've grown up in? You know, this world of perverted people who groom children, who at schools. I mean, literally, this is what the public education system has become. It's become a system that just grooms children. This is what it's become nowadays. Do you feel comfortable sending your kids into that system? Into this society of perverts, you know, mass consumption of pornography, gangbangers, the corrupt politicians who just don't represent our people? You know, it is about building a world that represents them and that we can feel safe sending our kids into. It's about restoring the natural world, the one that God gave us, where it's easier to pursue virtue than vices, essentially. You know, nowadays, everybody's got to have the freedom to do wrong. How about the right to do right? I don't care about the right to do wrong. I care about making it easy for people to do the right thing. But nowadays, that's just, that's too authoritarian. What the? You can't do that. What are you talking about? You know, it's like destroying the evil systems that have oppressed our people for this entire generation. This is our country. And that terrifies the boomer establishment. You know, they're horrified at that. They say, "What? You're authoritarian." Basically, you're like Attila the Hun, for God's sakes. You know, and they can call me all the names they want. They can call us all the names they want. They can call us, Nazi. They can call us white nationalists, which we're not. We're not. None of us are. We don't like that. We're Christian men. That's offensive. That's actually offensive to call us that because we are Christian men who want virtue in society. They can call us all those names, though. They can call us virgin, incel, everything like that. All in the book. that just rolls off my back like water. It does for you guys too. I can tell. I feel the energy in this room. You know, this is the kind of movement that is going to change this country and restore the greatness that existed once, you know? And my last thing that I want to say is get involved in this political movement that's going. It's making history. This is the future of this country. You know, boomers too, you know, you guys, you're a part of this too, okay? You're a part of this too, as Riddler would say, you know? You know, I'm giving you a chance. That nobody ever gave me a chance. Yeah, but boomers too, we need you guys. We need you. But it's important to call out where you guys failed us, because we're having to deal with this stuff, and it's a lot to manage. It would be so much easier with you guys on our side. But get involved in this movement. You know, a year ago I was nobody. I was just a kid like watching John Doyle videos in my room. You know, I was a high school senior. I was nobody. I was not political, nothing. I was just a simp, atheist, cringe guy. You know, and now look at me. Look at me now.
Who's laughing now?
Yeah, literally. Who is laughing now? I think it's the globalists, guys. I think the globalists are laughing at not at me, because I'm awesome. We are awesome. They're not laughing at me. They're just laughing at themselves because they're pathetic individuals, you know? But this movement brought me to the church. It really saved me, for God's sakes. I mean, I would be going to hell, but, you know, now I can pursue God, and I'm so thankful for that. This movement is truly incredible. It's changing lives. It's actually doing incredible things, better things than the boomers ever did. You know, this country deteriorated under them. It is now the strongest youth movement ever. We have powerhouses in Congress. We have hundreds of thousands of people on board. You guys should definitely get involved. They're scared of us, pal. You know, they're going to be scared of you guys too. The globalists, they're already quaking in their grocks about you guys because they see the potential in all of you. History is really happening right now, and this is one of the few times in history in which you guys have a chance to write it and be a part of it. And I want you guys to be alongside this incredible movement as we grow. We grow and expand, you know, as we grow into the walls of the liberals, you know. I want you guys to be alongside us as we do. And as Donald Trump said on the day of his inauguration, he said an incredible quote, and you guys might know what I'm talking about. From this day forward, a new vision will govern this land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first. All right, thank you guys so much. I'm President Wolf.
How's it going, everybody? I'm going to say the N-word. Of course, I'm talking about nationalism, and that is going to be the main topic for my speech tonight. Now, many of you guys might know me from my Cozy.tv stream, Canada First, and my movement up north. I'm Canadian, and I'm also a trucker convoy veteran. I was down there for about 23 days, and I've learned a lot being down there on the ground with the truckers, with the real salt of the earth Canadians, and I feel like this is the nucleus of our nation, right? The nucleus of our nation are the people who are going to go out into the streets and fight for what is right. They are angry with the system, and that's a good thing. We should be angry with the system. And there's too many people out there who are not angry enough with the system. You hear this all the time. You'll always hear unity over division. We have to be unified. We need to come together as Americans or Canadians. We have to come together as one people. Do you think that the people who were just outside our door here, not even half an hour ago, want to be on our side? Or do you think that these people are our enemies? This is something that a lot of the boomers that Carson and Kai were talking about came to understand during the trucker convoy. We want to make sure that the people who disagree with us are not influencing our politics, right? This is ultimately the essence of politics. You have two sides that are duking it out for authority, for power. And this is something that I love about the America First movement. This is something that, I love about Canada First, all my guys up north, is that we understand this. And this is honestly a Zoomer thing, right? And Kai touched on that during the first speech. We don't want the leftists, we don't want the communists, we don't want the globalist freaks dictating how our nation is run. During the trucker convoy, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called many of us out there terrorists. And lately he has been jailing many of his political opposition, including my friend Jeremy, including NPP Randy Hillier, an elected official, one of the last real conservatives up in Canada. He caught 9 charges, fabricated charges. Randy Hillier caught a charge for assaulting a police officer when he did no such thing. And this is what you guys down here in America need to watch out for, because this is happening not too far away. It's just up north a little bit, right? Randy, he was down there for the whole 23 days with me. A truly upstanding guy. And he was going truck to truck, greeting the truckers, giving them food, giving them water, giving them money. And this is how his country repays him, by charging him, by throwing him in jail, by locking him up. And it wouldn't surprise me if he was sent to solitary confinement, ultimately. Is this unity? Do you think that our enemies want to be unified with us? Or do you think that they understand that they need to get rid of us in order for them to win? Do you think that our enemies, the globalists, like me standing up here at this podium, you think that they like Kai or Carson or John Doyle or Nick Fuentes? Do you think that they like when we speak out? No, they do not, right? It's very effective what they do. But we cannot combat left-wing authoritarianism with liberalism, with libertarianism. We have to have a right-wing authoritarian leaning in order to effectively combat this, right? I'm sick and tired of, going on Twitter or, going up to some certain rallies up in Canada or some certain rallies down here, and you see all these hippie types out there, peace and love, man, We can't have any of that. It's not effective, and you can't do what you want. We can't allow people to teach children about gay sex. We can't allow people to overdose on prescription drugs. And no, Dave Rubin, we will not allow you to purchase a kid for a couple $100,000. That is gross, that is disgusting. And in a real country, that should never happen. If you cared about this nation, you would do everything in your power and utilize every tool at your disposal to squash your political enemy. The globalists, the pedophiles, the Satanists, the neocon careerists, and ultimately, those who reject Jesus Christ. I hate evil in this world, and that's why I stand up. I'm a lover, just like all of our other speakers, just like all of you guys. We're all lovers here. But in order to be a lover, you have to hate evil. You have to stand up to evil. Soon, in my home country, it's going to literally be illegal for me to speak out, for people to be conservative, for people to be right-wing, for people to be Christian. And this is due to many of these careers politicians that are simply clients for the globalist elite. This bill is called Bill C-36. It is the anti-free speech bill. And you Americans down here are very lucky that you guys have the First Amendment. Because up in Canada, we do not. And Bill C-36 is seeking to change the definition of hate speech to mean if you detest or vilify someone or something. Extremely vague wording, and it's simply going to be used to persecute conservatives, right-wingers, comedians, people who want to make jokes on the internet, funny people in general. It's going to be used to persecute them and send them to jail, right? Just recently as well, the NDP and the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party, they formed a a coalition up until 2025, putting Justin Trudeau in power. Do you think for a second that these people are not going to utilize their authority, utilize their tools, the tools at their disposal to bring down the hammer upon us, right? The white pill here is Generation Z sees through this type of trickery, and we will be the generation that puts America first. We will put our nations first. Now, Russia, China, Iran, and many other countries that Western media demonizes, they are not our enemies. Our enemies reside within our borders. And we must look inward at our own governments, at our own politicians, even at our neighbors sometimes, right? These are the people, these are the subversive people that truly have an impact on our everyday life. And I'm sick and tired of hearing, on Fox News or on whatever other alt-con media source, oh, we gotta watch out for China, guys. Russia, he's terrible. Vladimir Putin sucks. Z's in chat for Vladimir Putin right now, by the way. Let's get some Z's going in the chat. I wrote it on the whiteboard over here just to give us some good luck today. But I'm sick and tired of that. China has never done anything to me. Xi Jinping has never persecuted me. Vladimir Putin has never persecuted me. But Justin Trudeau has. Our Western governments have, right? They must and they will be stopped. Why do we send billions of dollars in foreign aid when we have our own issues here at home? Why are we expected to take care of other nations' citizens? The conservative leader up in Canada, well, the presumptive conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, he's one of these subversive political characters who wants to increase immigration and give immigrants $10,000 simply for going to Canada. How is this conservative? How is this conserving the essence of our nation? How is this nationalistic? The answer is, it's not. It's simply not. We, as America Firsters, as Canada Firsters, as nationalists, represent the true brand of conservatism. And it's only a matter of time until we are victorious. Politicians that do not put their people first are traitors, and they must be dealt with politically, of course. Our Western nations are being flooded with people who do not share our way of life. And largely, they will never share our way of life. Canada is bringing in close to 1 million people per year. This equates to roughly the population of Saskatchewan every single year. Now, do you think that this is benefiting the country, or do you think that this is giving Justin Trudeau more votes and diluting the population, the conservative, old-stock Canadian population? I think that we all know the answer here in this room, right? This is unacceptable, and a spotlight needs to be placed on these very important issues. The Great Replacement is real, and it's happening before our very eyes. Between the LGBTQ agenda, immigration, foreign aid, the destruction of the family unit, and the disintegration of our rights as people with a rightful claim to this land, there's a lot of work to do. But with people like Kai, Carson, John, myself, and Nicholas J. Fuentes, we will save this nation. We will save our nation. No globalist, neocon careerist, leftist freak will stand in our way. America first is inevitable, and we are the future of America. Thank you guys very much.
Suppose it's my turn.
John, get some time. Just give me a second.
Just finish my white monster in the meantime. They say you are what you eat. White monsters, I think, is with drinks too. I tell that joke every time. That's like my Reagan, when the balloon would pop and he'd be like, "Oh, miss me." That's like my white monsters. So, well, thank you all for being here today. I hope you've enjoyed the event and the speeches thus far. Can we get another round of applause for our tremendous
speakers here today. How about this? I mean, the charisma of Ty Cliff, the energy of Carson, the articulation of Tyler is just really unmatched. But you know, as much as I love being behind the desk, this really is my favorite thing to do because it allows me to come out and see all of you wonderful people with your smiling faces, and it really does show what impact we actually do have, tangibly speaking, because when all is said and done, there's really not an effective difference between what we're doing here and what, you know, the talk radio programs of the 1980s were doing, perhaps the cable news programs of the 1990s were doing. The end result being, of course, we end up here on the college campus. But, of course, no appearance on the college campus would be complete without the appearance of the foot soldiers of the global libtard menace. We do not like these people. Now, Ty Cliffs has been nicknamed the Olive Branch. He's much more amicable with these people than I am, as indicated, of course, by my Sith red tie and his Jedi blue tie. So, you know, these people, they write their little hit pieces, and they put up their little posters, they're name-calling us. Oh, they're anti-LGBT, like we're the weird ones, right? Like, they're out there like, yeah, our identity is centered around anal sex and genital mutilation. Those guys are the weird ones. We're the forgotten gamers of America, okay? We're normal. We like to play video games and drink Monster. But they can't help themselves. You know, they are miserable people, fundamentally. They are spiritually ill, and you can see it just by looking at them. They don't know God. They view life as nothing more than just the pursuit of pleasure. And so they do that to numb the pain of their own existence. And so when some young men come along, and they're more talented, they're better looking, smarter, more driven, they have no choice but to attack us. And they'll say it's because our ideas are like basically just like mean. You know, you guys are mean, they're so hateful, we're so loving, and they're so hateful. They're just projecting all of that onto us. But you'll find out that if you actually ask them what we believe, they don't understand it, they don't even know it. This can be proven, of course, empirically. We do have our sources for that. And that's more or less, I wrote here because they're bad word retarded, but that is true. I mean, fundamentally. They hate us because we're normal. They hate us because our existence in itself highlights their insecurities, and so, of course, they attack. And this puts me in a tough spot because I really did just want to make videos on the internet. You know, I really just wanted to be at my desk, my little microphone, little Jesus bobblehead. But because of this, I have no choice but to internalize all of it and use it to fuel what everybody knows in this room, maybe they like it, they don't, is inevitable, which is the slow ascent to power. It's so true. Because we are returning to the mindset of our ancestors. The mindset that these people have tried so persistently to psychologically condition us into abandoning, which is very simply that we are for good and against evil. We're not liberals, we are illiberal. We do not believe in live and let live. Oh, just do what you want, man. Because we know that evil is a cancer. It's a fire that, if not suppressed, will destroy your whole country. We thought that we could take communists at their word. Look where that got us. You know, we thought that good and evil are just like different points of view, man. And look where that got us. You know, I would absolutely hope that what I'm saying is alarming because I'm trying to raise alarms. I'm trying to alarm people because this country is going to hell and we want to do something about that. Because if we don't, then no one else will. And that's why they call us extremists. It's like a scary word because it makes people think of violence, despite the fact that virtually all political violence in this country is perpetrated by the left. But extremist literally just means that you are on the edge of the bell curve of like aggregated American political opinion. You see how stupid the average person is, right? Like outside, the average person, they're not very bright. They're not sending their best. How could you not be an extremist, you know? Like, I don't care about the pathetic, sort of feminine attempts to slander us. I only care about my country. And because of that, I'm obviously not interested in operating within the normal paradigm that has been established for like what is acceptable to talk about during the most backwards time in global history. Why would you want to be normal in abnormal times? That doesn't make sense. And so that's why that established paradigm, which by the way, is the reason that we've lost virtually every political battle of the last century. That's why they like it. That's why these journalists, these activists who are good little servants to the establishment, that's why they like it. That's why they monitor the actions of 4 up-and-comers, people who are ascending, intelligent young men who care about their country. But they don't write these articles about people like Matt Schlapp or Mark Levin, people who are household names more or less if you've been paying attention to right-wing politics for more than 5 years or so. And it's because they fear what we represent. Conservatives think that they want to win, right? Everybody in here wants to win. Show of hands, who wants to win? Can we do a little polling? We're so back. Everyone wants to win. This is good. We can work with this. They want to win, but because they are only used to losing, they're uncomfortable with what it will actually take to win, because the only thing they know and therefore are comfortable with is losing. And so we are actually the future of conservatism, because if there's going to be a future for this country, then it actually has to be conserved, and we're the only people who actually have the will to conserve it, because we will make America great again. But what does that mean? What does it mean to make America great again? That's the beauty of it. It really can't be defined. It's not something that can be exactly articulated, but nonetheless, it's something that we all know is true. This country is not what it used to be. But we still have in our possession the greatest resource in the history of the world, which is the American people. We can really build back better, can't we? We can make this country great again. And those American people, they've been sold out at every given opportunity by their own representation, by big business, by international finance, and now by their own neighbors and by their constituents. I mean, many people have realized that they can more or less capitalize on the well-meaning spirit of a desperate American people by selling them the most appealing product of all, which is hope. But this incompetent class of people have done nothing for us despite all of the influence, all of the money, and all of the power that we've given to them. And so the difference between that class of people and the class of people composed of my cool friends and myself is that we're not only the ones who want to win, but we're the only ones who actually can win. And as we've collectively gone through even the last, 3 years of the American experience, I'm sure it's as clear to all of you as it is to myself and my cool friends that we are not on track to win. There is absolutely no trend that would suggest otherwise. And anyone who tells you the opposite is lying to you, or more likely trying to sell you something, which is actually particularly damaging and vicious if you do that within politics. Because if I'm trying to sell you a pen that doesn't work, or a pair of shoes that weren't actually in AOC's office, your life in the macro timeline is not probably altered that significantly. Whereas if I'm in the business of selling you hope, selling you false representation or false advocacy, I am occupying a volume that you require to be filled truthfully and competently in order to preserve a society that enables you and those you care about to actually flourish. And so that's why I'm much less concerned with those on the left and much more concerned with those who don't belong on the right, because it is imperative that we remember this. The only thing worse than the enemy is the traitor. These are very unfine people, folks, let me tell you. But despite that I've been, and I really like this, people call me the CEO of gatekeeping conservatism. I'm very proud of that, because I understand that political thought and political affiliation, it sort of evolves over time, with our education, with our experiences. And what's curious to me is that despite the societal entropy that we've all witnessed throughout the last several decades, and of course more specifically within the last few years, the approved paradigm of mainstream conservative dialogue has essentially been unwavered with very few exceptions. And what's particularly tricky about conservatism is even the name sort of connotes this unwavering nature, that refusal or even inability to compromise or to deviate. However, the problem that we have yet, I think, to widely identify is that conservatism has cemented itself as something less about preserving ends through means and more about preserving the means in themselves for the sake of donors, for the sake of think tank pseudo-intellectuals, and for the sake of those who ultimately seek the destruction of our nation, and for those who are irresponsibly and dangerously nostalgic for a time that just frankly no longer exists. And so this is to say that what is ironic about conservatism is that despite that it connotes those themes of, the steadfast allegiance to principles, that unwavering spirit that we mentioned, ultimately, if it is to be successful, it must actually be adapted to whichever elements of the traditional American society are the most vulnerable and under attack. This is because conservatism, properly defined, as we've said on the channel before, is simply just that which conserves the traditional American society. And so today what I'm asking you is this: what have we actually conserved in the last 70 years? We have failed to conserve the prospect of the American worker. We have failed to conserve the family unit. In fact, for every one conservative victory that you could name, we could list a dozen failures. And all of those victories would prove to have not actually stood the test of time. If we did this speech 3 years ago, you'd say, we got Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Well, where that got us? Not very far. So would this not then necessitate a strategic reconfiguration? In what other operation could you so demonstrably and catastrophically fail without at least retreating back to the drawing board? You couldn't do this in athletic competitions, you couldn't do this in business, virtually anything else, all of which are unequivocally less important than the state and future of our country, because it is that state and future which makes all else possible. And there's a quote from Albert Einstein, which I think speaks to this quite well, but he's dead, and I think he was a plagiarist too, so we're going to go with the more generationally appropriate Far Cry 3. We love Far Cry 3. There's a cutscene in Far Cry 3, of course, where the antagonist, Voss, laments the fact that every time he tries to kill you, you just end up surviving, you come back and try to fight him again. And so he has this monologue where he lays out what is the practical definition of insanity. And he says that is repeating the same action over and over and over again and expecting things to change. To do this would be insanity. And it's not like we're crazy, right? Like, we recognize the importance of God, we We recognize the importance of human life. We recognize which bathroom we're supposed to be using, which athletic competitions in which we're supposed to be competing. There's no good reason for us to have lost so much ground in the last several decades, but nonetheless, due to a potent concoction of malevolence, incompetence, general malice, we have. And so given the state of our country right now, there's probably no better time, if we even have time at all, to address that our window is closing, and it's closing quickly. And once it closes, rest assured that it will not open again. It's going to be permanently locked. Because they asked us for free speech during the 1960s, during these social movements, because they didn't have representation, and we had the power. So they asked us for free speech, man, and we said, okay, because that was according to our principles. And now that they have the power, they remove us from all aspects of society and give us no chance to speak up, because that is according to their principles. So for us to successfully shift the paradigm in the competent direction, we must attack the required reading of the incompetent class. And so you might remember a couple of years ago, supposedly Arizona went for Joe Biden. And prior to that, Arizona was a solid red state for 16 of the last 17 presidential elections in this country. The state that has the Latin for God enriches transcribed on their seal. We're supposed to believe they really felt compelled to turn out for Joe Biden and his coalition of atheist, pro-abortion, anti-religious freedom puppeteers. Do we believe that? Do we believe that?
No.
No, we don't believe that. Well, before Arizona was more or less Biden country, it produced a senator by the name of Barry Goldwater, and we're probably familiar with him. And Senator Goldwater had presidential ambitions which ultimately failed, but he's most remembered for having published a brief, ghost-written manifesto. It's kind of like a little passive-aggressive shot. It's ghost-written. I shouldn't even listen to it, right? It's called The Conscience of a Conservative, and this is considered to be the definitive work of the modern conservative movement. I'm sure many of us have read it. Many of us probably have a copy of it in our libraries. And even in the current printed hardcover version of the book, it describes itself ambitiously as the seminal work of modern conservatism. This, of course, begs the question, is it truly important for the seminal work of modern conservatism to have been written 60 years ago? Especially when factoring in how it is the ethos of the movement that was more or less born by that book that has caused our country to devolve into its current state. And ironically, it is in the foreword to this manifesto that he pushes back against the argument that conservatism is outdated just because it's old by comparing it to hypothetical arguments that works by men such as Aristotle would be invalid simply because of their age. And this is correct. To label conservatism outdated simply because it's older perhaps, that would be redundant given that it seeks to conserve regardless of the passing of time. But the irony lies within the fact that it is precisely the emphasis on the principles in this manifesto which has crafted this particular strain of conservatism that has demonstrably failed to stand the test of time, and therefore is truly outdated. So allegiance to that which conserves the traditional American society can never be outdated, as it is a means to prioritize an elevated end, whereas allegiance to the means in themselves can be outdated, and in our case has proven to be outdated. Now, before we continue, I think it is important to clarify that we probably all agree with much of what Senator Goldwater outlines in this manifesto. We probably respect his legacy wholeheartedly. He paved the way for people like us, and so we have to exercise our humility in admitting that we're standing on his shoulders to a large degree. We're not arguing necessarily that the principles in the manifesto are in themselves wrong, but rather that it is the incessant and uniform emphasis on these principles in particular which has failed the conservative movement and, by extension, the American people. And so for those unfamiliar, if you explore the index of this manifesto, you'll find chapters on things such as states' rights, government's involvement in agriculture, taxes and spending, the welfare state, etc. And if you spent more than 5 seconds operating within the established paradigm of mainstream conservative dialogue, you know topics like these like the back of your hand. I know topics like these like the back of my hand, but I'll tell you something, and feel free to stop me if you can't relate. When I look outside and I see my city burning to the ground, when I see Black Lives Matter and Antifa rioters approaching my property, no police to be seen, telling my children that they should hate their country, that they should hate their ancestors simply because of the color of their skin, that they should question their gender identity before they're even old enough to be left home alone by themselves, when my neighbors have their jobs shipped overseas and they're being told that that's okay because they'll theoretically be able to buy orange juice for 30 cents less. Is that worth the dignity of being raped of the American dream? That's what they've been told. Or perhaps even more degrading, when they're actually forced to train the people that will replace them at the jobs that they've had for decades. This happens all the time. Or when my friends, they can't find women who don't have body counts in the double digits, who aren't taking SSRIs, who can't go 2 days without posting something on Instagram to derive external gratification from social media, who aren't alcoholics who derive their entire personality from fast food and Netflix and drinking wine and thinking that's its own personality, whatever. Or when my sister can't find a husband who's maybe not participating in his own enslavement to carnal desires, who's not pursuing general pathologies like escapism through drugs and video games and pornography, who keep the faith, who have a purpose greater than themselves, who recognize their role as a man in society. When I can't even give a speech to this very fine audience without having my life threatened by assemblies of dysgenic retards, you know what's on my mind? I'll tell you. I'm not thinking about federalism. I'm not thinking about the deficit. Believe it or not, I'm not even thinking about Ronald Reagan. What I'm much more focused on is the immediate realization that the solution to these problems is not a flat tax. The solution to these problems is not to abolish the Department of Agriculture. And as much as we hold these truths right now to be self-evident when we hear them, you wouldn't know such to be the case upon opening and reading through the manifesto, or even operating within the established paradigm of modern conservative dialogue, which exists, of course, largely because of this manifesto. He even ends the introductory chapter by writing that there is no difficulty in the day's overriding political challenge being identified, which he writes is to preserve and extend freedom, and that the conservatives' first concern will always be, are we maximizing freedom? What even is freedom? What are these abstractions? What is liberty? What does that mean? Well, the aforementioned established paradigm will have you believe that they are synonymous, but they're actually not, because of course the pre-modern understanding of liberty, whether that's in the Greco-Roman understanding as articulated by Plato, Aristotle, or Cicero, or the Christian understanding as articulated by Augustine, Aquinas, or Dante, was not that an individual should be free to just do as they please, but rather that an individual must cultivate discipline and an education in order to pursue what is good. In other words, the founding thinkers of Western civilization rejected our current understanding of liberty, and they even regarded it to be a form of slavery. And it's a much more pernicious form of slavery because it's enslavement to oneself and to one's desires. But in the American conservative dialogue that we see so often now, they would disagree with that. They would tell you that liberty is the freedom to pursue your preferred method of self-destruction. Or the things like Drag Queen Story Hour, which is drag queens performing these very sexualized dances for children in taxpayer-funded libraries. Well, those are just one of the many blessings of liberty, as people like David French would have us believe. We don't like David French. But as it would turn out, freedom is not an end in itself. It is simply a means to an end, a transitory phase. And given that man's nature is flawed, which the conservative claims to understand, solely emphasizing freedom as something to be pursued in itself would logically and inevitably result in the demoralization and the destruction of man, and resultantly his civilization. It's also important to note that Senator Goldwater emphasized the importance of not only maximizing freedom, but extending it as well. And this is the thinking that led us towards the Bush doctrine of extending freedom to nations who have never had it and who never wanted it. And this was the ethos of neoconservatism, to provide freedom. And then neoliberalism basically clarified by just adding to be gay onto that. But they're more or less the same thing. But regardless, we were assured by the so-called expert class that we would be met with open arms, we would be celebrated, there would be parades, and of course, none of that happened. Freedom and democracy did not actually flourish in the areas. The Middle East, this is an ancient religious culture, and they really thought that they could be in there for 10, 20 years and get these people to start waving flags. It's not exactly that simple. We literally lost to guys driving Tacomas. They had old Soviet AKs. You almost have to respect it in a way. Speaking of boomer conservatives, we will go on a tangent here. They often, when you talk about the Second Amendment, they assume that that which is going to make the nation able to, fight off a hostile and illegitimate regime is more or less dependent on the type of arms to which they have access. And so, we got 180 million guns in this country. I think it's actually 400 million guns in this country. And you look at the Taliban, what they have is will. They are not weak. And they had AKs, well, of course, that's seen in Lord of War. We will not jam. Okay, Nick Cage. But we have so many guns, and we just went through the greatest tyranny in the history of the world in this country, actually, except for maybe a handful of exceptions in the 20th century, and no one did anything about it. And this is not a call to violence, this is not incitement, it is simply to say that there has to be something more to drive the people than simply tools. There has to be this internalized willpower that this country is more or less lacking. And I think that's important to understand. But of course, none of that happened, and that experiment is still costing us money and people, both of which are being taken from American households, American families. And so how is it exactly that the traditional American society is conserved by robbing American families of their wealth and of their young boys and young girls now? Well, what is being conserved while they're doing that, when we're spreading gender theory to women and children in the Middle East? Nothing. But our leaders will insist that, well, they hate us because we're free. And that prompts us to sort of participate in what I refer to as this like George Bush era conservatism, which is like mounting American flags on lifted trucks, starting USA chants, watching American children have their genitals mutilated before being pumped with hormones, and assuring ourselves that the real barbaric society is over there in the Middle East. I'm not so sure about that, but much of this emphasis on freedom, like all political strategies, was manufactured and mass-marketed with preconceived ends in mind. So during the Cold War, America sought to defend itself against communism and more specifically leftist economics. And it did this by highlighting the very convenient reality that these countries that were experimenting with these policies were not able to do so without extreme authoritarianism and human rights violations. It was this Cold War era political strategy that cemented freedom and fiscal conservatism as the quintessential conservative talking points. So during the Cold War, America had to emphasize and perhaps even exaggerate how free it really was. But after the Cold War, we needed a purpose, right? The Soviet menace was supposedly defeated, freedom and capitalism had supposedly won, and so America needed a post-war objective. And so just as the Cold War had required an emphasis on freedom, the emphasis on freedom now required war to be perpetual within the post-war American imperative. And as much as we may be inclined to naively believe that we're the top dog because we're like just that good, that's kind of circular reasoning, isn't it? The reason that America is the last remaining superpower from the 20th century is because we avoided the two world wars longer than the other countries did, and then we avoided a war with the USSR, which would have done more damage to our country than even was done to Britain during World Wars I and II. And with this, we're reminded of a celebrated historian by the name of A.G.P. Taylor, who wrote extensively about British history. And he said that though the object of being a great power is to be able to fight a great war, the only way of remaining a great power is to not fight one. The United States is a great power. We've been a great power for a very long time, but we will not be a great power within the next few decades, or even years, actually, considering what's going on now, if we continue down this path, because we have taken for granted all of what made America great. And because of that, there's no reason to suggest that it will remain great. And this is the fundamental problem with neoconservatism. Freedom turned out to just mean moral and social degradation, and free markets turned out to just mean jobs being shipped overseas and companies lobbying to open up our borders so that mass immigrants could come here from the third world in the name of cheap labor, because it turns out that America is not actually the natural state of the world. Like all great civilizations, America is impermanent. And all that made America great, we've unfortunately found out, was impermanent as well. So the neoconservative and post-war emphasis on freedom, on capitalism, on small government, all the adjacent bumper sticker talking points being not only the defining features of conservatism, but the only ones that are allowed to exist within the approved paradigm, that's turned out to be a failure. The traditional American society has not been conserved. The moral fabric of the nation has not been conserved because it's not to be taken for granted. The family structure of a nation is not to be taken for granted. The ethos of a society, the logos of a society is not to be taken for granted. And interestingly enough, it is those very facets of the society that compose its foundation. Without that foundation, your society is doomed to fail. Because at that point, it doesn't even exist. There's nothing under which to unify. You're all simply consumers who feel as though you have freedom because the screen people tell you so, and you can watch porn and buy guns, and so that's why Washington crossed the Delaware. I don't know about that. But the point being that neoconservatism, which by the way, historically, as we know, was just founded by disaffected liberals who didn't quite like socialism, but who did like bombing foreign countries. That's been a failure. And anybody who at this point, given the state of the country, is still trying to sell it to you, doesn't view you as a fellow American, but as a consumer waiting to be exploited. Do not be fooled. And to reiterate, this is not to say that the principles as outlined in the manifesto are in themselves bad. They're not. But it is to say that social conservatism is the prerequisite to fiscal conservatism. In other words, if you don't conserve the social and moral fabric of the nation, you will not have a nation left in which to establish those free markets that you cherish. Without conserving the social and moral fabric of the nation, your free markets will devolve from lemonade stands to OnlyFans. And we don't like that. Because capitalism is just a machine, right? It's this amoral abstraction. And without a moral fabric in society, that machine will deviate from providing to you appliances and furniture at a low cost efficiently to eventually enabling people to profit off getting your children addicted to pornography, addicted to marijuana, any one of the many vices designed to pacify and depress people. And without a social fabric in the society, that society will eventually destabilize to where it requires that big government that we fear so much in order to prevent, but more realistically just delay, its collapse. I'm assuming that much of this is ringing a bell. To repeat, fiscal conservatism is a means to an end. I want to be able to keep more of my money so that I can provide to my family and provide for my family. I want to be able to purchase goods that we require. I want to be able to do that for as little cost as possible. Small government, that is also a means to an end. I want to be able to pursue good as defined by God without the government breathing down my neck, and I want to be able to provide for my family without some bureaucrat taking my money, telling me how to run my business. It's like this extortive consultation service, except you can't say no because then they'll shoot your dog. But all of these principles, they are just simply means to ends. They're not ends in themselves. They serve a purpose. And when that purpose is forgotten or when it's taken for granted, we can't expect it to self-perpetuate. Conservatism, properly defined, is simply that which conserves the traditional American society. But instead of actively working towards that end, which would require effort, we've elected to work towards these abstract means in themselves, which was AstroTurf, by the way, the transnational corporations, the ruling class, basically all the people who you know more or less hate you and want to destroy you. So I don't think anyone in this room feels as though we're really winning, as though you're scoring points, especially when you do things like, hey Lib, socialism sucks. Hey AOC, I'm going to ethically troll you on Twitter. These are not actually viable political strategies. This is why there was an unprecedented and tremendous pushback against President Trump, because he broke free from that post-war neoliberal consensus, and all the aforementioned actors who are acting, of course, in bad faith knew that they had to stop it, because that has been the only legitimate threat to their power and results to the established paradigm that has existed for the American people in the last 80 years. But unfortunately for us, these privatized propaganda apparatuses that have assembled to serve as an extension of these power structures under the name of freedom and free markets and whatever, they've indoctrinated the country into not only believing that it's permissible, but righteous to punish someone for being socially conservative, formerly known as actually conservative. If you want to conserve the American family by rejecting feminism and the sexual revolution, you will be attacked. If you want to conserve the American culture by, I don't know, maybe proposing that bringing in like 2 million people a year might be a tad bit excessive, you will be attacked. In other words, if you actually want to conserve something beyond these abstract principles, you will be attacked. These abstract principles that have been proven over the course of several decades to be indisputably inadequate in themselves at the task of actually conserving the country, you will be attacked. And that's actually a good thing. If the worst people in society, the people who kill babies, the people who desecrate the legacies of the men who built this country, the people who want to sexualize your children, if they're not attacking you, then it either means that they view you to be an ally or they do not view you to be a threat. In either case, fix yourself. Conserve something or lose everything. We will make America great again. Thank you. I am being told that we are now doing a Q&A, that is a question and an answer. And I'm thinking we're getting a picture as well.
Take good photos.
We are monitoring the situation. I'm being told that this is what we're doing. What's he say? It's like nice and thin. It's nice and
Everybody. Go cross-eyed.
What's right? It's at Tyler L. Russell.
So, Kai had low impulse control, and he went ahead and dove right into his Q&A, so he didn't really participate in this succeeding Q&A. But if any of you guys have any questions for all of us together or one of us individually, feel free, and we will take them. You, sir.
Wanted to touch upon what Kai mentioned earlier.
Son of a-
I'll take this one, John.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
About the philosophical bedrock of America and America First, our position on the world stage. I absolutely agree with Kai that the philosophy that should be guiding America is this aristocratic republicanism, Christianity, virtuous society, true freedom, that kind of stuff. As a turbo Catholic, personally, I prefer state and church. Join in the hip. But that's besides the point. I wanted to shift your attention to the great nation of Russia and the world that they are fighting for right now in Ukraine. Specifically, one person may not be familiar with, Alexander Dugin, and he has his own philosophical framework for Russia. It's a very esoteric kind of building on René Guénon, Martin Heidegger, Julius Evola.
the world that Russia is fighting for is what he describes as a multipolar world, where all of the major powers and superpowers have their own spheres of influence. So, having said all that, do you believe that we, with our own philosophy, Russia is more authoritarian, more ultra-traditionalist, do you believe that we could form a possible, assuming, when America first marches into the White House inevitably, should we form a holy alliance with Russia, throw NATO into the dustbin of history, and to what extent should we be America first, like keep to ourselves our sphere of influence, or should we be, go around the world, Deus, well, we gotta protect all the Christians everywhere. So, specifically Armenia, which is very important to Fresno.
We took some photos by the Armenian Genocide Memorial. Very tragic. I'd like to pay my respects. It was very tragic. So we love the Armenian Christians, our Christian brothers. But as far as Alexander Dugin and being a Duginist and whatnot, I'm not too familiar with that. I think Carson's going to be the political autist to go through that ideology with you. But as far as the pragmatic, this is kind of what we're concerned about right now. What sets this movement apart in particular is that there is an overwhelming sense of pragmatism. We have things that will actually happen. People are actually getting into office. These ideas are going to quickly become a reality. And the immediate reality in terms of what the United States should do with Russia is support any kind of counter movement to NATO. I'm 100% with you about throwing NATO into the garbage bin. NATO exists as a counterforce to Russia. Russia, at least generally ideologically, I don't know about Putin's idea of restoring the Soviet Union. We're not communists here, but I do think that politically, spiritually, and whatnot, he's closer to us than the globalist American empire, the GAY, is. So using support for Russia in order to undermine that evil globalist empire on the world stage is a good thing. And obviously, I'm more on the side of George Washington and the other founding fathers who said something to the effect of long-standing foreign allies are going to present a danger to us, and I think that's true. I don't think the United States should have long-standing foreign allies. I think that flies in the face of what nationalism should be. But I do think that right now, the dissidents in America certainly can find an ally in what Russia is representing, that being the humiliation of this very liberal West.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, you're good. We'll go to you next.
Question for Doyle. I'm not going to call you a libertarian or anything like that, but I think you'd probably lean more on that than your typical shitzo on the internet.
I'm a libertarian? Get him out of here!
We get the cough inside.
So, a lot of the topics have been around like big government, and the thing on our side called, the strong man, right? The strong man. And do you support the idea, because I think you may have touched on it a little bit in your speech, of a guy that needs to go in there and either wrestle control and take control, or at the very least ward off some of the stuff? And if that takes
yes.
4 years, if that takes 8 years, if that, are you in favor of something like a stronger, or are you more in favor of keeping to what we have right now?
Sorry, the way you phrased that, I started fantasizing, and then I got excited, so I sort of got distracted. No, I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, but I routinely, basically post about how Trump should be king. And there's really no argument against that. Seriously, the only argument you can make against Donald Trump being king is, well, the Constitution, we'll change it. Now it's constitutional. Everything's fine. Or, well, what if he becomes corrupt? You really have to understand the difference between, I think, the masculine and the feminine ego. And this is a defense of what he's referring to as the strongman. The feminine ego, which is what controls our country now, they want to be above us. They view us as peasants. And, oh, look at me. I don't have to wear the mask, but you do. These are humiliation rituals. The masculine ego wants to be the guy who gets credited in the history books for defeating those people. That's Donald Trump. He's always been in the elite class, but he was never quite like them. And I think that he feels very scorned by this, because he always really talked like a New Yorker. He cheated his way into UPenn. He was never quite with them. And they've always sort of excluded him because of that. And so as much as we would like to think it's because of love of country, I think it's just an ultimate revenge tour for Trump. So that's what I think is going on. So yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of that. Dark Magus. Well, that's why I'm wearing the black suit. And, I'm glad you asked me. That guy asked Kai a question about what we're going to do. I don't know if you know this, Kai's a Mormon. When we take power, it's going to be like the end of E.T. Kai's going to just go to his little planet that he's getting because he's a Mormon. Are we ever going to see you again? I'll be right here.
All right. Hold on. Church, this guy's not getting into Deseret. We're not letting him.
Yes. Oh, hold on. We told that guy he'd be gone. Sorry. Wow.
Yeah, it's alright. So, okay, let me just be honest, I don't know what I'm doing here. I only came for my only time.
Oh, let's go.
I'm not just gonna say that, but the question that I've arrived from listening, because I won't be preface by the is that what is a good time of change? How do you go by it? I come from Holtz North, a great high school, but there was a time when I had a friend there, and they were practicing against dress code and all that, and I went against it saying, you can't change if you're just gonna do it for one day. If you want to do it over and over and get like those nice people outside, I would have respected them if they just kept doing it. They just stopped for 30 minutes and left their merry way to know who knows where. But how do you think it's the best way to go instead of speaking, instead of doing things that might be one day, instead of,
Yeah. This is something that we run into a lot, actually. And it's something that I want everybody in this room to kind of reflect on. A lot of people will pick up their politics as a trend. And I talk about this specifically within the realm of politics and faith. We talk a lot about both of these principles and the way they inspire each other. But it's more important, in my opinion, to find your faith before you find your politics, because that is the ultimate bedrock of anybody's reality, is the reason you exist and your calling on this earth. And I think if a lot of people find their faith through their politics, they end up prioritizing the political over the religious, and that's not a good thing. It's not to say that religious leaders can't go astray in ways that you think are not true of what you believe, but it is to set your priorities straight. And I think what you're alluding to is something that comes as a consequence of that. If you assign politics because they're trendy, and especially young men, we understand that it's fun to be contrarian. It's fun to get people upset at you. I found out we were having a protest, and I was like, oh yeah. I was like really excited. It's like a kid at Christmas. And all these guys feel the same. We go out with a megaphone. We're like, oh yeah, this is awesome for gun gamers of America. A little bit of trolling, right? And that's the way that especially men think. We're a little bit mischievous, and we are more typically contrarian in nature. You need to get to the point where your ideology, either in the way that it has benefited your life or in the way that you've seen it improve your country or your family, becomes the ultimate kind of bedrock outside of your faith, of course. And that is what vindicates you, and that's what keeps you on that track, what keeps you behaving the way you do, and keeps you pushing that political movement, whether or not it's popular. I say a lot, actually. The big threat to the right-wing movement among Zoomers is that it becomes too popular. And I think that the people who only are right-wing because it's controversial and because it gets a rise out of people, the more and more popular, and once we get in power, they're going to start to fall away. And that's dangerous. So decide right now whether you're in this because it's a fun thing to joke about with your friends because you just like making edgy jokes, or because you're really here for the health of the country. And ultimately, I think looking after your fellow man, all the families, all the children, the people who will inherit this country, looking after them is going to be a lot more sustainable, and certainly is going to put you in a better frame of mind. You can stop thinking about it as a trend. So I hope that's kind of the answer. Find your true ideological leanings and the reason for them before you just engage in politics for the fun of it. I'll let you guys call on somebody. I call that too, Kai fans. People are going to start writing stuff.
It's a rigged system, folks.
That guy.
Okay. Do you think it's beneficial for us to actually engage in the system of like our local Republican Party, and then also as far as getting into local politics is concerned, would you recommend going the course of like city council or running for smaller positions and then getting that slow ascent to power from there?
So true. Yeah, absolutely. I think that people underestimate just how much power localized politics has. And they predicted this in the Federalist Papers, which I'm going to go ahead and call this girl out because she's mad at me because I called her out. So maybe it's my fault. But Morgan Zegers, who has Young Americans Against Socialism, she has this whole thing about the Federalist Papers, and oh, here's me, and I'm candidly reading the Federalist Papers, but it's like the ethos of the movement that she espouses is completely antithetical to the Federalist Papers. Like, that was an argument in favor of stronger government. They predicted that more of that power was going to become centralized. The problem is maybe that inspires bad people to want to seek that power. But there's also some good people who maybe want to seek that power. But I think that a lot of that can be effective, especially if you get sheriffs and they just simply refuse to enforce things. Like, what are they going to do? Send in like Federal police? Maybe. That'd be entertaining. So I think that like if you're a young guy who's more or less disillusioned with his current line of work and you want to change something and you know that you're a good guy, go for it. Like there's no argument not to. Worst case scenario, we're back at like square one, but there's, I think, a net positive to that can be very easily attained.
Run for precincts. Those usually go uncontested. You can run after you're 18, so that's definitely a good way to get in there. And you know, the people in precincts and committeemen start recommending what people get into the primaries. And if you recommend the people that get into the primaries, you can recommend the right people. So yeah, that's the way you infiltrate. Okay, I gotta go to him because we called on him accidentally.
This question is for Mr. Russell. Have you received any harassment from the Canadian government for attending the trucker convoy at all?
Yeah, so I haven't gotten the call yet that I'm gonna have to go to jail or anything like that. But routinely, you know, there's government-funded journalists up in Canada, some of who are most likely watching right now, and they get lots of money from the Justin Trudeau government, and they like to slander us and email our parents and all that stuff. So if you want to call, I mean, that is kind of government, you know, persecution there. But a couple days ago when MPP Randy Hillier was actually charged when he went to court, they named my name in court and he cannot talk to me. There's a no contact bail condition for Randy Hillier and myself. So we'll see if I get the call. I mean, I was down there for 23 days, so I'm kind of expecting it. And that's just the reality of Canada right now, right? So lots of journos trying to come after me, absolutely government funded. And yeah, I've been named by them too, so yeah, thank you. Yeah, probably. Let's go all the way in the back.
Let's go. We're just making it.
Yeah.
The question I asked Kai really had in mind for Doyle, which was, you often make the point that conservatives shouldn't try to revive a previous state of liberalism. Is a point you make a lot.
So true.
So I have to ask my question again to ask Kai. Was the founding too liberal in its origin? And like I said, the founding fathers knew what virtue was. The quotes he made that they knew religious people were the only ones bidding for a constitution, or this constitution.
Literally speaking, yes, they were liberal, but I think there is something to be said about like what we're conserving, and this is not to make a classical liberalism argument, but it's like what we really are conserving would maybe be understood as like liberalism, at least in this country. Maybe some people are thinking conservatism more in like a European context, but again, if you go back to the founding, like I think Kai even pointed out, I think someone mentioned that Thomas Jefferson, who was probably the most radically liberal founding father, my understanding is that when he was governor of Virginia, he made it such that the punishment for sodomy was equal to the punishment for rape. So I don't know if he exactly would have been waving the rainbow flag, but like these guys, because they had like not even relatively, normally adjusted hormones, they were normal guys, they would be absolutely on board with us with every issue. So maybe in their writings they're talking about like government's bad, but if you just imagine their reaction if they would have seen that dysgenic, depraved group of people, they would have done something that would be not good for me to say in the microphone, because they were like real human beings. So I think that you could make the argument that it was too liberal, and maybe that's what led to it. I think that their biggest flaw, which I talk about in the Christianity and Conservatism video, is they took basically that religious people for granted because they couldn't conceptualize what things like technology would do in terms of like literally possessing people and turning them away from Christ. So I think if we had the founding fathers in this room right now, they would probably want to use the state to ban things like that, to literally use political power to will the people back into being virtuous.
Can we get a round of applause for our speakers, please?